Welcome back to Teachable Moments, where we get to interview one of our esteemed faculty members here at Texas A&M University San Antonio. My name is Christopher Valdovinos. I am your host for Teachable Moments today. And with me, we have a very special guest, and I'm going to go ahead and let you know some of the accomplishments of this amazing guest that we have today before we introduce him. He received the Piper Professor Award of 2023. He's a Regents Professor. He received the Regents Professor Award in 2020. He has quite a few fellowships under his belt. He has the German Academic Exchange Service Fellowship. He has the Fulbright Fellow of the University of Berlin and a Fellow of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. So let's go ahead and give it up to our guest, Dr. Edward Westermann. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Westermann. We really appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks, Christopher. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, after kind of mentioning some of these amazing recognitions or awards that you received, would you mind kind of defining some of these awards? Like, what does Piper mean, or what does Regents or Fellowship? What is that?
Yeah, so the Minnie Stevens Piper Award is given. There are 10 of those given per year around the state of Texas to professors at community colleges, universities, and colleges throughout Texas. And it's related to teaching, so it recognizes your teaching. And for me, that's obviously a big thing, having the ability to be recognized for teaching, because, I mean, we exist really at the university to teach students, and it's also one of the areas where I take my greatest satisfaction is being able to engage with students. The Regents Professor Award is a system-level award. It's the highest level award to recognize a faculty member's excellence in all the areas of scholarship, teaching, and service. And as you noted, I've been very lucky to get fellowships that I've been able to go overseas and study. So when we do history, and when I do, for example, historical research, a lot of my research has been conducted in archives in Germany as I look at those kinds of topics. So these fellowships allow you to be able to go to a specific archive and spend a number of days, months, in some cases, a year at the archive to help you research the topic that you're looking at.
Wow, that is, congratulations again. Honestly, receiving these awards. And I think once we know the definition of these awards, kind of shows the impact as well. So congratulations again. Thank you so much for your hard work and your dedication in your field. Us as students, we appreciate learning about that. So thank you. And so would you mind kind of talking to us a little bit about your professional and academic journey and how that sort of led you here at the humble south side of San Antonio at Texas A&M University San Antonio?
Yeah, my journey actually took me around the world before I got back to San Antonio. My dad and mom were educators in elementary and middle school here in San Antonio, and my dad had retired from the Air Force in 1984. So San Antonio became my home in 1984, but I didn't finally get back here for my own career in the Air Force until 2009. So getting back to San Antonio and being able to be part of the community. In the meantime, through my Air Force career, though, I'd been sponsored for a master's degree and a doctoral degree, and I taught at the Air Force Academy, and I also taught at a graduate school for the Air Force in Alabama. So it took me a long time to get back to Texas, but it's great being back in San Antonio, and it's also really great to be part of this community. One of the things that I think is really amazing about the last 14 years that I've spent at Texas A&M San Antonio is watching the growth in the university, but watching the growth in our students and those students who have graduated and gone on to do great things, and the programs that have developed, just like the program here for communication and media. The amount of change and the amount of progress that has been made in those programs is really amazing.
I mean, if we didn't exist, we wouldn't be able to recognize your hard work.
Right.
So thank you again. So you mentioned you've taught at the U.S. Air Force Academy. What are some teaching techniques that you maybe picked up from there and kind of brought here at A&M?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing when I think about teaching is how do you connect your material to your students, right? So making something relevant to your students' lives. And when I was talking about things like the impact of ethics on professional ethics on military officers or on civil servants, and I teach about the Holocaust, where we see a society that lost those professional ethics, right? And what that led to. It led to genocide and mass murder, in war crimes and crimes against humanity. So in talking to my students, I look for ways to connect the information that I have and the things that I've learned so that they can maybe look at their contemporary world, look at the things that they want to do in their own lives, and be able to draw lessons and insights from that. Now, sometimes it may be just as simple as kind of a joke, and I'll give you one that I've done with my class. My daughter was a fan of Pretty Little Liars, so I ended up watching several episodes
Nice.
when she was younger, and it reminded me of Nazi Germany, because what I mean by that is everybody in their search for A is backstabbing and lying to everybody else. And so when you use that to talk about this is the way the bureaucracy functioned in Nazi Germany, students kind of get it, right? Now it's in jest, right? But at the same time, just looking for music, for example, how does music connect us to our emotions or film, and how can that be a very positive thing? But how can it be misused by organizations and governments in a way that leads to a kind of sense of in-group solidarity, but it means it excludes other people.
Wow. Well, I'm assuming you have some episodes to watch for your within your syllabus, right? As a requirement. They'll fully understand Germany. Thank you. I'll make sure to let my sisters know because they love that show. So actually, you mentioned some of the topics that you've taught within your classes, and which actually leads me to my next question because Dr. Westermann, he has written several books. And I have some here listed, under the German art. It's titled German Artifact Defenses, from the University Press of Kansas. The Hitler's Police Battalions Enforcing Raid Policy in the East, University Press of Kansas. Hitler's Ostkrieg.
Yep.
German word, just learned German. And the Indian Wars, Comparing Genocide and Conquest, from the Oklahoma University Press. And Drunk on Genocide, Alcohol and Mass Murder in Nazi Germany, from the Cornell University Press. And that's one of the most recent ones, right?
Yes.
So that actually leads me to my next question. What kind of drew you to this topic in particular, modern European history, Nazi Germany, war and society? Because these are some of the classes that you teach at the senior level, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, so my interest in the Holocaust developed. I was a pilot in the Air Force for a number of years, and I was an exchange pilot with the German Air Force. So in order to be able to do that, you go to language school, you learn German, and then I was flying with the German Air Force for 3 years. So you're in this complete immersion environment. And I wanted to go back as an undergrad. I'd always loved history, and I wanted to go back and teach at the Air Force Academy. So they were sponsoring me for a graduate degree, and I wanted to make use of the German. And so as it turned out, when I got to my master's degree program at Florida State University at the time, my advisor, Alan Steinweiss, had said, okay, well, what's a topic? And we were looking around, and I started to look at what did the German police, what did policemen, what we would consider to be precinct cops, how are they involved in Nazi Germany, enforcing kind of what the regime wanted the society to be like. And that led me to write a thesis that later became one of those books, the Hitler's Police Battalions books, to look at how the professional ethics of the police were changed and how they were modified. And the only way you can do that is by kind of having that language background and being able to go to those sources and to go to Germany to find that information. And once you start studying the Holocaust, it really had an impact on me. I met survivors, and the survivors that I met were really important to my development as a scholar and also thinking about the topic. So Zev Weiss, who was the survivor of the Hungarian deportations to Auschwitz, was sponsoring a class at the Air Force Academy on the Holocaust. And so I was fortunate enough to be one of the first instructors in that class. And to talk to Zev and then to talk to other survivors, and then to really, once the Holocaust gets a hold of you, you really can't let it go, because it's not a question of just what happened to European Jews and other targeted groups by the Nazis. It's a question about humanity, and it offers us a lot of insights about what is worst in humanity, but when you see how survivors responded to the challenges that they faced, also what's best in humanity.
The way you explained it, it's beautifully. It is a really important topic to discuss, especially for historians. You're teaching, you're bringing up these historians, the students that are majoring in history. But have you had any students that are not history majors?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So especially for that class, psychology majors. I've had sociology majors and criminology majors. One of the things that I've focused on for about 30 years now is looking at perpetrator behavior. So trying to understand why the perpetrators did what they did. And if you think about it, psychologists are very interested in why people do things. Criminologists are interested also in these kinds of behaviors, right? So I think I've had communication students as well. It's hint, right? So I think what you see is there's a broad interest at a number of different disciplines for a subject like this. And this semester I'm teaching a gender war and genocide class for the first time, which also gets to many of these issues and how we conceptualize traditional gender roles and what that means when we talk about perpetration, and how men and women can be involved in these acts of atrocity and killing, and then trying to explain what does that tell us, and what do we learn by examining the perpetrators.
So, you cover quite a bit. Just a little snippet of what you just gave me. It's very interesting. Kind of encourages me to take a few more classes here and there within my major. So thank you for sharing that. So actually leads me to my next question. So, you seem very passionate about what you do, what you teach. What are some teaching techniques or methods that you love to implement within your classroom?
Yeah, the one thing I always say that I really love about being at A&M San Antonio is the sense of community that we have. And that's in with the faculty, but that's with the students, and that's in the classroom. So for me, it's really important that we establish that sense of a community of learners. So my students are learning from me, but I'm learning from my students. And so at the beginning of any class, I normally have assigned a primary source related to the lesson or a reading related to the lesson. And I always ask the students in groups of 2 or 3 to start the conversation at the beginning amongst themselves. So share their insights. What did they find interesting or important? And then I use that to then kind of query the students, talk to the students and ask them, okay, let me hear from this group, let me hear from this group. And what you find with that is that students are already then starting a conversation with each other. And then the insights that they gain is important because they hear what their peers thought. But then a lot of times they have their own unique take on this type of material. And I'm always surprised myself how much I learn from the students and from their insights. And in every one of my books, my students are in those books from the insights that I learned from them. Wow. But the community building is important, but I don't let them do the same people the whole semester. So I make them always go and move around the classroom because I don't want my students to end this semester said, oh yeah, that guy was in class with me. He was in the back row, the guy from the back row, right? So I want to build that sense of community and kind of comfort and knowledge and sharing our ideas in the classroom. That to me is really important.
That's great, and I thank you for doing that as well as a professor. I think that helps pass the time, makes the 16 weeks feel a lot shorter for some of us. So thank you for doing that for the students, for your students. So actually, my next question is, what have you heard that is your students' favorite part of your class?
Yeah, the one thing that I tend to hear, which is always good, is that they like my lecturing style, that they enjoy the way I run the class, right? So they feel engaged, they feel the enthusiasm that I have for history, and I think that that's really important, is to connect your own enthusiasm for the
Oh
topic
yeah.
with the students, right? And some people always think, well, history is about dates and memorization. No, history is about relationships and thinking about how events have shaped the past, but how they continue to shape the present. So when I teach the Civil War and Reconstruction, for example, what did the failure of Reconstruction, what did that do, and how did that impact the world we live in today? How did that impact the way we look at race relations, the way we look at civil rights movements, right? So it's really important to be able to draw on our historical knowledge to understand how we got to where we are today.
I think what you mentioned about sharing that passion or enthusiasm with your students it's what helps students to kind of learn. If you have a professor that may not be interested, or you can kind of tell that they're not getting anything out of the lecture or the class itself, it is pretty tough to kind of for the student to get anything out of the class. So um, I think the enthusiasm is great, and I see it even in this interview. So thank you. So you kind of answered a little bit on my next question that I had in mind. What are some First, can you define what a historian is? And can you talk about some of the misconceptions of historians? Do you think, you talked a little bit about it, so I'll let you kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the a historian is not somebody that necessarily has a doctoral degree. All of us can be historians, and in a matter of fact, you don't need a degree to be a historian. You can, if you're someone who's interested in learning about a subject, maybe about your community. For example, Gil Dominguez, who was a student at A&M San Antonio, wrote a book on Latinos in the Vietnam War. And
Oh wow.
he was, when we were still out at the Gillette campus, he had come out to speak. And he's a historian, as someone who was interested in understanding how the experience of Latinos influenced our understanding of the Vietnam War and about service and ethics of service. So the beauty about history for me is that anyone can engage in the process of history. And again, it's not just about learning dates and names and places. It's about connecting the things that happened at different times in U.S. history, like the Vietnam War, and how it might have affected civil rights and civil rights movements for Latinos and Latinas, right? So what did it mean for those people who served when they came back to the country, and what are our expectations? So looking at the way that history makes us aware of the world we live in and how we interpret it is really
Yeah,
important.
definitely. Oh yeah, it is important. I think keep helps us keep an open mind, honestly. And so thank you. Um, an additional question that I had is what is your favorite class you teach? I feel like you're very passionate about everything that you teach. It might be a little hard for you to pick, but I'm curious to know.
Yeah, my training and my focus, especially with my writing and my scholarship, has been on the Holocaust, and that is a very personal subject to me. But also the Civil War and Reconstruction to me, and those classes have a lot in common. When we look at the antebellum South, the South before the Civil War, and the way in which race was structurally inbuilt into Southern society, and the way in which it led to the war itself, and how prejudice and bias were incorporated into a structure that prevented people from being able to live free, right? And so, how does that change? So, what did the Civil War do, and what did it allow for? I think that there's a lot of similarities that we can talk about looking at that period of our history and think about Nazi Germany and how race was used, how in and out groups were established, how perpetration and persecution of groups were performed, and ultimately, what did that lead to? And to me, those are the types of topics that really speak to me personally. And I think they also speak to student experience,
Oh,
right?
yeah, definitely. Well, Dr. Westerman, this leads me to the very last question that I have. What is a fun fact about you that maybe your colleagues or your students may not know?
Okay, this is going to come back to one of my daughters again. So I'm not old enough to have watched the Beatles live, but I've seen them on TV, right? And all the screaming, the crowd going crazy. I took my youngest daughter when she was in fourth grade to the One Directions concert here in San Antonio. And I can say then I know what the Beatles were like because it was crazy how excited the young boys and young girls and the older women and younger men, everybody that was there, they were really going nuts. So for me, that was kind of an exciting way to see history up close and personal and understand again how the way in which music and individual celebrity can also influence the way that people think about their lives.
Well, Dr. Westerman, thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Talking about your passion and kind of tap more into your professional and academic journey. So thank you. I'm sure a lot of the students that watch this Teachable Moments segment, they'll be really excited to take your class. So thank you again for joining, and thank you again for everyone watching. We really appreciate you joining us today to watch Teachable Moments, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Again, my name is Chris Valdovinos, and we have Dr. Westerman. We'll see you next time.